Well, thanks for having me here. I think this has been a long time coming. I worked with Lacey, been working with Lacey for quite a few months to get up here. We had it scheduled and something happened, and now it finally worked out. Um, so today I get a chance to talk to you all about really two things. The outdoor recreation industry partnership which is the main reason I'm here, but also our work, which we'll dive a little bit into a economic impact report that we recently put out in June. And so as far as an agenda is concerned, so I'll run through who I am. Do that real quick. Talk about what is the Outdoor Recreation Industry Partnership. We'll spend a little time on that. We'll take a look at the profile of Minnesota's outdoor recreation economy and ways in which the community can interact and work together with the partnership and with Explore Minnesota going forward. So who am I? Wow, I forgot to put the I on the title. So, I should have mentioned that I didn't remember I was doing this until I got an email on Sunday from Lacey. And so I threw this together real fast. But so I am, like Lacey said, I'm the director of the Outdoor Recreation Industry Partnership. I've been doing that for 2 years now. The partnership has been around since 2023. We signed the MOU between the agencies at that time. I'm also currently the deputy director of Explore Minnesota, and my portfolio is outdoor recreation. So it aligns with the ORIP work. Previous to my current position, I was senior advisor at the DNR for roughly 5 years, starting in January of 2019, working with Commissioner Stroman. When she started that role, prior to that, I was a congressional staffer for 11 years, and that's where I met Becky and Steve, who would make a pilgrimage to Washington, D.C. at least 4 or 5 times a year, it felt like. So I was a congressional staffer for 11 years on the House in the U.S. House for Congressman Tim Walz before he became governor. And that entire time, I handled his natural resources and his agriculture portfolio. And so that was my bread and butter, was that space right there. Before I moved to Washington, I got my master's and my JD in natural resource law and policy from the Vermont Law School in South Royalton, Vermont. And then before that, I was a snowboard tech and a fishing guide. So I've been doing natural resource policy and outdoor recreation for my entire career. And I couldn't imagine doing anything else, because outdoor rec is something it's just something I'm so passionate and interested in. And I know probably you all are too, living in Ely, which is such a hub for those activities. So I want to take a moment and dive into the Outdoor Recreation Industry Partnership. So I'll try to give you a real quick kind of historical overview of what ORIP is before I start going into this, the 1, 2, 3, 4. So ORIP is basically Minnesota's version of an Office of Outdoor Recreation. So offices of outdoor recreation are a relatively new thing. They've been around since the first one was started in 2013. So they've been around for about 12 years now. Utah had the first Office of Outdoor Recreation, and then Colorado soon after them. And then a number of Western states started having their offices of creating their own offices of outdoor recreation. It spread to the south, to the northeast, and finally the Midwest. Right now, there are currently 24 states that have offices of outdoor recreation. Our closest neighbors with offices include Wisconsin, They started in 2019. Michigan, they also started in 2019, and North Dakota. So we're still waiting on South Dakota and Iowa, which we hear are going to be coming online fairly soon, hopefully. But what is an Office of Outdoor Recreation, basically? And that kind of goes to number one on this chart, the mission. So generally the mission of Offices of Outdoor Recreation are to support the growth of the state's outdoor recreation economy. And so every state is different. Every state sets it up differently. Minnesota decided after about 2 years of deliberation and public engagement and outreach, we came up with our Minnesota model for our Office of Outdoor Recreation. Some states do it a lot differently. We decided to do a interagency partnership amongst agencies that already operate in the state. Some states like Utah and Colorado have decided to set up their own standalone agencies to do this work. Some states like Vermont have a task force, I guess, for lack of a better term. And some states like Washington State and a few other states just have a single policy aide in the governor's office, who is considered their Office of Outdoor Rec. So, so when we look at the outdoor recreation economy, our scope at ORIP is fairly narrow, and that's for practical reasons. One, it's only me doing the work. So you've got one FTE, which is state government speak for a full-time employee. And we have a biannual budget of about $150,000. So that's about $75,000 a year that we can spend on programming. And most of that goes to our annual convening, our annual summit, and our report, which I'll get to in a minute. But so the outdoor recreation economy obviously is broken into two components, the users or the consumers and the producers. 90% of ORIP's work, the Outdoor Recreation Industry Partnerships work, focuses on the producers side of that equation. We focus, our stakeholders tend to be in the businesses, the entrepreneurs, and the workforce space. And we did that for a reason, because the users, when it comes to users in Minnesota, we looked across the entire, we did kind of a landscape audit of who works with users in the state. And it's everything from the feds at DOI or Department of Ag to the state with DNR and IRRR and places like that to nonprofits like Conservation Minnesota or Save the Boundary Waters or Wilderness Inquiry. So we looked at the user side of the equation and we figured there's enough cooks in that kitchen already. But then we looked at the producer side of the equation and there were no cooks in that kitchen. No one focused specifically on the outdoor recreation industry, on outdoor recreation businesses, on outdoor recreation entrepreneurs, and for job seekers. And so that's where we decided to really kind of focus all of our effort and energy that we have. So I like to kind of raise that point because I think a lot of folks think we work with issues like access or opportunity and those kind of things, and that's not really what we do. That falls more on the user side of the equation, the DNRs and the Wilderness Inquiries of the world. We look at grant funding and business accelerators and attracting businesses to the state and that kind of stuff. So that's a lot of our work there. So we have one mission. We have two components to that mission. The main one being producers, the producer side of it. We have three strategic pillars for our work. And so these are really kind of our guiding pillars that all of our work leads into. So the first pillar being we create resources for those components, primarily producers. And we'll talk about one in a few minutes. When we talk about the economic impact report, that's a good example of us creating a resource that can be used by businesses, by industry, in whichever way they choose to use it. We provide them with the data that hasn't been there before, basically. Another pillar, and I feel like I don't like to choose between the three pillars because that's like choosing between your kids. But I feel like probably the most important pillar that we do is the build community pillar. The state has a really important role when it comes to being a convener of disparate interests, I guess. And we really lean into that role at ORIP because we're guided by the belief that a united outdoor industry is a strong outdoor industry. Right now, we see there are a lot of silos within the outdoor industry. Just three large silos being silent sports, motorized sports, hook and bullet sports. Those are just three silos. You rarely see the folks from Federal Premium hanging out with the folks from Winona Canoe. And so that's really our job, is to get them all in a room together to work on these large issues that impact the entire industry, whether it's climate change or tariffs or public land access and those kind of things. Big issues that impact the entire outdoor recreation industry. You'll see a similar approach to this at the federal level. There's groups like the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, the Outdoor Industry Association that does this work at the federal level. And we're trying to do that. We're trying to break down those silos at the state level. That's really our job. And one example of that, well, two examples, we do it at both. We build that community at both the state level and the federal level. So a couple of examples of where we're working to build community. At the state level, we host a summit every year. This year was actually the first one that brings the entire industry together, the Minnesota industry together on all the segments that I mentioned, the silent sports, the hook and bullets, the motorized, and we get together and we spend a day together and we learn and we commune. And so that's an example of one thing we do to help build that community. At the federal level, we are currently I think we were the 17th member of the Confluence of States. So the Confluence of States is basically it's a bipartisan group of states with offices of outdoor recreation that meet together monthly to share knowledge, to work together to grow the industry at the federal level as well as the state. And then another good example, and I think we'll get into this later, is we work to bring the outdoor community to Minnesota. So the best example of that is our recent work with helping to bring the outdoor retailer to Minneapolis. We stole them from Utah. And we don't feel bad about it at all. The third strategic pillar that we really focus in on is communicating the value of outdoor recreation to Minnesota, to really tell that story of why outdoor recreation is valuable to folks. Most of our messaging, most of our talking points are about the economic value. We talk a lot about jobs and GDP and tax revenue. That's where our expertise is, but it doesn't stop there. We all know that the outdoor recreation is far more valuable than just dollars and cents. We talk about the healthcare and wellness impacts of outdoor recreation to individuals and communities. We like to talk about the educational outcomes that accrue from kids spending time outdoors. And there's a lot of work happening in that space in Minnesota. We're a national leader when it comes to getting kids outdoors in educational context. So we are really trying to communicate value, and we're really leaning into the messaging lens that outdoor recreation is not an amenity, is not a nice to have, it's critical infrastructure. And this is something that I think the public has really gotten behind over the last 5 or so years. They've really internalized the switch that outdoor recreation used to be thought as an afterthought when it came to political conversations or where to invest money. But now folks coming out of the pandemic, I think, are seeing outdoor recreation as equally critical, particularly outdoor recreation infrastructure, as critically equal to roads, bridges, hospitals, you name it, for the health, wellness, and just livability of local communities, both rural and metro. So that's really, so those are our three strategic pillars that we operate around. Finally, the ORIP is made up of currently 4 agencies. Those are the 4 founding agencies. We're always looking for new agencies to join us. But those are the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, the IRRR, Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation, and of course, Explore Minnesota. Those were the 4 founders that got together, developed this idea, and made it happen. Like I said, we would love to work with, once we get past this kind of foundational stage of laying the groundwork for this partnership over these first 2 years, we'd really start to like to engage other agencies to come on board with us, because there's another number of other agencies I can think of whose work intersects in the outdoor recreation space, whether it's the Department of Transportation, who we always hear that transportation is a barrier to outdoor recreation. And so they would be an important partner for us. Minnesota Department of Health, as I mentioned, we lean deeply into the health and wellness benefits of outdoor recreation, as well as the Minnesota Department of Education, which would go towards that educational outcomes angle. So that's what ORIP is. Again, we support the growth of Minnesota's outdoor economy. We focus largely on the producer side. We have 3 pillars, and we're made up of 4 agencies. And so I really want to talk about, this is probably the first major resource that we put out as a partnership. It's the Outdoor Industry Economic Impact Report. And so this can be found online. I've got I think my last slide has a link to where you can get the report if you're interested in reading it online. But Minnesota's Untamed Dividend, outdoor recreation fueling our economy. So we really wanted this to be kind of our first resource that we put out there, because it's the foundation of the stories that we tell about outdoor recreation to Minnesota. We have to have that data to be able to tell a believable and just a trustworthy story when we're talking to civic leaders or policymakers. It's really important to have this in one place that folks can reference. So it was really important that we put that out first. And we released this in June at our first annual summit this year. The numbers themselves the numbers in the report are largely based on the numbers that we get annually from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So the Bureau of Economic Analysis, they have a satellite account. It's called the Outdoor Recreation Satellite Account. And that was put into law, I think, like 2016 or 2017. And it's the Outdoor Recreation Satellite Account that is their job to every year, usually every November, mid-November, about a week before Thanksgiving, they put out the economic impact numbers of outdoor recreation nationally and at the state level. So they nationally put out the gross economic impact of outdoor recreation, which is, I think, $1.5 trillion. That's with a T. I mean, it's huge. It's bigger than the automobile industry. It's bigger than pharmaceuticals. It's bigger than oil and gas. Outdoor recreation is a behemoth. But the BEA report, they put that report out every November. It's kind of the gold standard of all outdoor recreation economic data. And so we wanted our report to be based on that data so that we too could be considered trustworthy as a report for folks. So when BEA puts out the report, I mentioned they put out gross output for the nation. They also look at the state. At the state level, they put out GDP, and they put out jobs, and they put out total employment, and a few other metrics. But two really important items or metrics that they don't put out at the state level that we wanted. Really, the reasons why we wanted to do our own report were for these two reasons. We wanted to have a gross output number for the state. The feds don't do that. They told us they've been asked a number of times to put out gross output for the states, and their response is always lack of resources. So they don't put out the gross output for the state. We wanted that number because it's a much broader number than the GDP. GDP is just basically one cell, and the gross output is a cumulative cells of a product or service. And so we wanted to see what that gross output looked, because we knew it would be a lot higher than our GDP number. And whenever you're telling a story, obviously you want to have a higher number, right? And so our GDP, and I think this is the next slide, but I'll skip ahead. So Minnesota's GDP is 13 billion, 13.5 billion, I think, GDP. And our gross output is 23.5 billion. And so that's a significant number when you compare it to other industries in the state. We don't compare the gross output. We do compare the GDP, because that's the importance of using the BEA as your foundation, because the BEA you can compare industry to industry, and it's important to be able to do that. And so we use that. And then I think the most important factor that we included in this new report, and we're currently the only state that does this. We're the only state that currently does this. Oregon had done it in the past. I think they did it about 6 or 7 years ago. But we broke it down. We broke the BEA numbers down to the county level, so that you can have that conversation with a civic leader or a policymaker at the county level and be able to tell a more nuanced story that will have an actual impact on those folks. Because when you tell a county commissioner the statewide impact of outdoor recreation, it sounds good, but it doesn't stick as well. If you tell someone that there's 3,000 outdoor recreation jobs and $2 million GDP in their county from outdoor recreation, that sticks. And so we wanted to put county level data into this report, first state to do it in the nation. And so we made that happen, and that's probably the biggest change that we have in our economic impact report. And we'll go into some of the county level data for the Northeast in a minute. But so the way the team that worked on this with us, RRC Associates, they're actually out of Bozeman, Montana. They've done this done reports like this for a number of states. But they built us a model so that we can basically plug and play the BEA data into that model and spit out a new report every year that we get that data. So once we get the data in November, fingers crossed we get the data, as long as the government's open in November, we'll be able to update this report and put out a new report in January when the new legislative session starts. And so we're really excited about being able to do that, to keep this up to date every year. And I think it'll be a really valuable resource for folks to tell that story. I might have gone over some of this. So the scope of the report, like I said, first ever statewide report on, this is the first ever for Minnesota's state report on the outdoor recreation economic footprint. There's been a number of reports for different activities on economic impact. There's been a number of reports from the DNR on maybe state trails or state parks, but there's never been a kind of a statewide cumulative umbrella level report, and that's what we wanted to do with this. Again, it combines national data with some Minnesota specific research, and then it provides insights at the state, the county, and the regional levels. So I'm gonna try to go through this real quick because it's super boring. But just to give you kind of sense of how BEA comes up with these numbers for the industry. And this is not without its controversy. Everything is controversial when you get to Washington. And so this is no different. And probably the most controversial aspect of the annual report is how do you define outdoor recreation, which is kind of a foundational thing to develop a report like this. And so the feds decided to, you know what, we'll just make it as broad as we can. And so the basic, and this is just kind of a paraphrase, but the definition of outdoor recreation is anything you can do for fun outdoors. And so that includes ice climbing, canoeing. It also includes gardening. It includes outdoor rock concerts. And so it's a very broad definition. Granted, those activities like gardening and outdoor rock concerts are a very small percentage of what the outdoor recreation economy is, but it is included in that number. And that's always controversial.
You can't be small.
Either want to make the definition broader to include pickleball or something, or narrower to cut out some of those outlying groups. But it doesn't include team sports. It doesn't include anything that happens on non-natural surfaces and that kind of thing. And so the first thing BA does is they define outdoor recreation, and then they identify all the industries that would be outdoor recreation related. Once they define all those industries that are outdoor recreation related, and those include both core industries, they call core industries, which are gear and guides and equipment rentals, as well as supporting industries like travel, hospitality, transportation. They use national surveys to identify what percentage of that industry is actually outdoor rec. So if the industry they're looking at is boating, they'll use a survey of how much of the boating industry is outdoor recreation related boating, because not all boating is outdoor recreation related. And so they'll use surveys to identify what percentage of the industry is actually outdoor rec. And then they apply the numbers from the states, the data on jobs and businesses, to come up with their final GDP, jobs estimate, and whatnot. So that's the quick overview of the methodology. So some of the top line numbers, which I've already mentioned out of the report, 1.3 trillion national, like I mentioned, is bigger than automobiles, pharmaceuticals, oil and gas. 23.5 billion gross output Minnesota, 11.6 billion GDP, which is it doesn't compete with some of our major industries in the state, like healthcare, medical technologies, financial tech, and all that kind of stuff, which is in the 50 to 100 billion GDP range. We're in the 11.6, but we fall right in there with you. You see a lot of natural resource oriented industries in the 11 to $2 billion range. And that includes outdoor recreation, agriculture, mining, forestry, those kind of things. So we kind of are tops of the natural resource oriented industry segments in the state. There's about 96,000 direct jobs. And that number is smaller than it really should be, I think, because the BEA does not include, for whatever reason, they don't include sole proprietors, people that operate on their own. And that's a ton of people. And so for some reason, They don't include that. So to give you a kind of a sense of where we stand in the upper Midwest, Minnesota is tops when it comes to percent of GDP for outdoor recreation at 2.8, which is awesome. We love to see Minnesota at the top of that. We're at 95,937 jobs, which is lower than Wisconsin and much lower than Michigan. But my caveat to that is Wisconsin has a larger population than Minnesota. And Michigan has about 2 times the population of Minnesota. So, and you look at how that comparison, that's about, we're doing pretty good as far as our I like to use a per capita number there to show what our percentage of jobs is in the state, but I don't think we have that yet. So yeah, we're doing good in the upper Midwest. We always want to continue to grow that number as much as we can. So yeah, I mentioned we broke it down into we were able to break it down county level to the county level. And so this is our northeast region of the state, and it's really not, when we're talking about regions, it's not really super scientific. We just used Explore Minnesota's regional map. So we have a northeast region, a southern region, a central, a metro, and a northwest region. And so this is the northeast region. And you can see what percentage of GDP they fall into. So the highest percentage of GDP obviously is Cook up there, and then St. Louis, where we're at, is right there in the middle, surrounded by Lake Itasca. And then Pine is actually down. It's below Cook, but it's higher than St. Louis and Lake as far as percent of GDP. So it's really interesting to see how these numbers break down by county. So this will give you a better sense of where we are. So for example, St. Louis County, jobs supported by outdoor recreation, 3,729. And then you've got the outdoor rec value added, the outdoor rec economic output, the proportion of jobs, location quotient, and that's not something I can, so location quotient is basically how much higher the county is than the state average. So if the location quotient is a 1, then the county is exactly at state average for percent of GDP. If the location quotient is below 1, they're below average the state GDP, and if it's above 1, they're above average the state GDP. So for example, Carlton County is below the state average of 2.8, and St. Louis is above the average. So and then you've got the proportion of GDP for outdoor rec. And so so the report goes into all counties, all 87 counties in the state. It shows you exactly where we stand. And like I mentioned, we plan to update this report every year so that we can see what the trajectories are and how it looks like. And a lot of this is, a lot of these will be based upon macroeconomic trends that are kind of out of our hands, but it's something that we work with local businesses and entrepreneurs on to support them through, like the global tariffs and reduction in workforce and those kind of things. So I should have mentioned that these numbers are from 2023. So the BEA numbers lag a year. And so the numbers we'll get this year in November will be from 2024. So we really won't see the impact of things like the tariffs and stuff like that until the following year's report, probably. So yeah. Let's see. Oh, and this is one big takeaway from the report, because the report is not just economic numbers. We wanted the report to be more than that. We wanted it to be broader than just economic numbers. So we did the economic analysis, but we also did a public lands inventory. So we identified where all the public lands are in the state, and it's in the report. So you're able to map those economics over the public land, where the public lands exist. And obviously we kind of knew this in our bones, but it's good to see it on paper that public lands drive the outdoor recreation economy. I think that's pretty obvious to everyone in this room, but it's good to have that data for us. So for example, visitor spending at state parks is 688 million annually. Folks usually spend 26 per visitor per day when they go to a state park to use a state trail. National forest, 57 million GDP, 1,100 jobs. National park, 70 GDP and 900 jobs. Obviously, that's going to look different in a couple of years. Small business support is obviously public lands is vital for small business support. Outfitters, campgrounds, guides, rural resilience. Public lands attract visitors year round and diversify economies. Community benefits. Public lands create affordable recreation and long-term growth. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir on this one because you're from Ely, and so. But that's one of the things that we found in the report, and one of the things we really want to highlight in the report for everyone. A few other things that you'll see in the report beyond the public land survey. We go into travel and hospitality spending. We don't spend a ton of time because Explore Minnesota already does a bunch of reports and data on that, but we kind of highlight it. And then we looked at what we call the non-economic impacts of outdoor recreation, like the health and wellness impacts and the economic outcomes. So it's a pretty hefty report. I think it's over 80 pages that we have, and we hope folks can use it because we don't want it to sit on the shelf. And as a government agency, we're not allowed to. We're able to go educate, but we can't advocate. And we're just hopeful folks can use it to tell the story that they want to tell based upon the data that we have from the federal government. And so that can be used to attract and encourage investment. I mean, one of the main reasons OR decided to move to Minnesota is because they saw these numbers and they saw the trajectory of these numbers. And so that's a big deal. This data can help support Minnesota businesses and entrepreneurs tied to recreation, whether it's convincing folks to invest more money in business attraction or business accelerators or pitch competitions or you name it. And it also helps folks to plan equitable and inclusive access so benefits reach all communities, because it does look into that. It does break it down into that county level kind of scene. So finally, ways I hope that we can kind of work together in the future is using this report and using the Outdoor Recreation Industry Partnership as a tool for you all to help communicate that value of outdoor recreation to whomever you're talking to, and to really lean into the framing of recreation as critical infrastructure. And I think that's folks get that nowadays. When I say that in front of audiences, I see a lot of nodding heads. Yes, because people feel it in their bones, especially coming out of the pandemic. It was vital for all of us to be able to get outdoors. And for Minnesota, parks and trails were some of the first, if not the first, infrastructure that was designated critical at the state level. And so, and when the federal government shuts down, they don't shut down the parks and the national parks, because they know how critical that is to the entire the enterprise that they're trying to pull off. So, and then another way that this can be used is to help build that community by connecting industry with infrastructure. I really hope that we can continue to. I see a lot of gaps. I was talking about silos, and this is one silo that I see a lot of times is folks that work in the kind of economic development, parks and rec, infrastructural space that do that actual boots on the ground, that create the bike parks and the ski trails and the mountain bike trails. They don't have a lot of relationships and connections with the industry, the private industry. They don't work closely with the Polarises or the Winnebagos or the Winona Canoes, or you name it. And we hope to help tear down that silo a bit more as well. And so I think I've got about 10 minutes to go. I want to let you all have some time for questions. And I'm going to leave this slide up because this is our website. So if you're ever interested in getting in contact with me, my email's on that website. I'm always happy to chat whenever. We've got our newsletter, our monthly newsletter. You can sign up for that on the website. Our podcast is on the website. This report is on the website. So it's just a place you can go to get the resources that we provide from the partnership. So I think that's all I got as far as, yeah. So
Presentation.
there you go.
Does anyone have any questions? I'm gonna bring the Zoom mic to you, but I can help you holler as well.
I have a question. I was surprised to see that a category called national parks outproduced national forests in Minnesota economically. I don't quite understand why that would be, given what happens in the Superior National Forest, the Boundary Waters, all the other recreational, the resorts, and everything else that happens in the Superior and over the Chippewa. Do you know why that is?
No, that's a good question for me to pass along to the folks at the Outdoor Recreation Satellite account, because they would be able to answer that right away. And so I would love to maybe connect, and so you can send me that, because that's a really good question that we'd like to have an answer to, for sure.
I'd like to hear more about OR, outdoor retail, coming to Minnesota, which is a big deal. And thank you very much, Randolph, for making that happen.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be helpful if you talked a little more about what that really is.
Sure.
And your vision for it in Minnesota and its multi-year nature, and then how that can be a vehicle to also promote nationally the public lands that we have in Minnesota.
So outdoor retailer coming to Minnesota is a pretty big deal in the industry. And so if you don't, outdoor retailer is it's the grandmother of all outdoor recreation trade shows, particularly in the kind of silent sport space. You've got SHOT Show, which is hunting, which happens in Vegas, and the ICAST show, which is fishing, and then you've got the outdoor retailer. And outdoor retailer, for many years, it was located in Salt Lake City, Utah. They, for whatever reason, we won't get into it, they decided to move to Denver for about 5 years. But it's always been a kind of a Mountain West show. So after a few years in Denver, they made the decision to move back to Salt Lake City, which was kind of a breaking point for the industry, because Salt Lake City has a number of folks that in the government level who are not the best of friends when it comes to public land, I guess. And so that put off a lot of the major brands, I guess. Some of the big brands like Patagonia and folks like that decided to pull out of the show. And the show really became kind of a shell of its former self in the last few years. I mean, after COVID, obviously. And so it went from a 20-some thousand person show to a 5,000 person show with no major tentpole retailer or a manufacturer brand there. And so outdoor retailer was really looking for a way to reboot, I guess. And so they heard the industry, and they wanted to find some place that was more central, some place that was somewhere in the middle between the East Coast and the West Coast, to make it less of a Mountain West and more of a nationwide show. And so we were competing against folks like Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, I think a few other ones, a few other big Midwestern cities for the show, because they did want to put it in the central region. They also wanted to move the show to August because it was in June, and June is a very busy month for the industry, and so no one was showing up. And so they decided to move the show to August. They wanted to move the show to August. Finally, they wanted a state that they felt comfortable about with regards to the whole public land issue that they were burned on in Utah. And they wanted a state that was really showed some dynamism in the outdoor recreation industry. It really helps that we have some really strong small brands that are raising their national profile. I think Garage Grown Gear is one of those out of St. Paul. They work closely with Lloyd, who is the CEO for GGG, on this show. And so I think Minneapolis just had all the pieces in place that they were looking for to cite a show. We had the convention center has been relatively recently renewed. They love the infrastructure in the Twin Cities because you can hop on a bike and you can pedal for 90 miles. They love that you can go to any of the chain of lakes, or you can go to Theo Worth. And so you've got plenty of opportunities in the Twin Cities for outdoor adventure. It's really kind of a mecca space for outdoor adventure. So they really love that. But yeah, we're super excited to have it because it does put a national spotlight on Minnesota's outdoor recreation industry. Not only will we have a huge presence at the show itself, but folks will be coming from all over the nation and all over the world to Minneapolis from the industry to experience Minnesota outdoors, both inside the convention center and outside the convention center. So yeah, and it's one of those shows that once they've determined their home, they hope to stay there until there's a reason for them to leave, really. So as long as folks continue to show up at OR, it's going to be in Minneapolis for the foreseeable future. So. It is August 19th through the 21st. And you got to know so the Outdoor Retailer is a B2B show. It's an industry show. It's retailers and manufacturers connecting. And so that's what it. No. But there's opportunities. They have a whole section of the show for nonprofits. And so it being Minnesota being its new home, all Minnesota nonprofits get comp space in that place. So it'll be an opportunity for Minnesota nonprofits to interact with the industry at large as well, which I'm sure they did in the past. And I know I've seen Save the Boundary Waters at OR numerous times in the past, but now they get to do it in their backyard, which is really exciting. So yeah.
I will just make a note for the Zoom participants. If you have a question, please add them into the chat. And then Phil, you want to say your, this is just a Zoom. I'll hold on to this and you can answer the question.
Okay, I'm just wondering, you mentioned national, state, county entering into the report. The valuations, does that go to the municipal level, or so urban public spaces, those types of entities, are they included in county, or aren't they included at all?
They are, so we don't break the numbers down to the municipal level. We haven't gotten there yet. County is the farthest we've ever been able to get, because it's expensive. It takes a lot of resources to do that. And there's a reason why we're the only state that even breaks it down to the county level right now. I would love to see it broken down even further, in not only geographically, but also in industry space. Because if you look at the report, they've got segments identified that you can see the economic impact of certain segments, like bicycling or paddling or things like that. But I'd love to see those activities broken down even further as well, because as we know, biking is road, it's mountain, it's fat bike, it's e-bike, it's gravel. I'd love to see it broken down that way. So I'm hopeful in the future that we can continue to break it down as much as possible so that we can tell that story even more nuanced, as we can.
Speaking of, Andrew Slade chimed in with a question on Zoom. It sounds like y'all know each other from DC work and Great Lakes Restoration Funding. But he asked about the DNR Outdoor Recreation Participation Survey, and if that's data that you work with, and if that survey is still going.
I'm not sure if that they do that every so often, I think, and I think that data informs a number of their other reports that the DNR does. So the DNR does a 5-year report on parks, on the state parks, and the use of state parks. And then they do a 5-year report on trails in the state trails. And so, and those reports are staggered. And those reports are used to help inform the, a lot of acronyms, but the SCORP, which is our state comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, which every state has to have to get LWCF dollars from the feds. And so those activities are ongoing. They inform some of the other reports that the DNR does. And those other reports that the DNR did are included in this report here, because RRC, the vendor we used for this, does the DNR's reports as well. So yeah, it kind of all meshes together, I think, hopefully.
Please join me in thanking Randolph Briley for being here to teach us about.